It is time for Treylon Burks to bounce back. I'll explain why on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. Let's get it.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets. If your best bet of $5 or more wins, visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. It's time for Treylon Burks to bounce back. I'll tell you other guys who should bounce back under Brian Callahan. Also, who could be a trade option for the Titans with Brian Callahan as the head coach. And finally, I got a Roland's rant for you guys on the continued stupid debate between offensive line and wide receiver. Before we get into all of that, thank you guys for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. Throw a thumbs up on the video if you're watching right now on YouTube as well. The show is always free. All I ask for in return is the press of a button. But with that being said, again, talking about bounce back candidates who could do more than they've done in the past. Now that Brian Callahan is the head coach, I got to start with Treylon Burks. But of course, let me know your guys' bounce back, right? Bounce back candidates down below in the comments. But of course, I'm starting with Treylon Burks, and I got to say this first. I have been leading the charge. I am as guilty as anyone of writing off Treylon Burks. Throughout the season, I said he's a ghost. The Titans should go into the offseason not considering Treylon Burks as someone on the team. They should look to potentially trade him for a day 3 pick. I will admit that is what I have said, and I hope that I am wrong, because Treylon Burks' ability to bounce back and add some value to this team could be absolutely tremendous. We sit here and we'll talk about do you draft offensive line? Do you draft wide receiver? I'm going to rant about that at the end of the show. But while we're all talking about what the Titans need at wide receiver, we got a first-round wide receiver at home. And if he could even play like a third-round wide receiver, a second-round wide receiver, it would still be a tremendous boost for the Tennessee Titans. Now, I have pointed out that I think there are some things that have led us astray with Treylon Burks. Number one, he has balance issues. Every injury that he has is a result of balance and body control, in my opinion. Maybe if you want to take out the one in Philadelphia where it's an illegal hit on him, sure, that's fine. But the lack of body control leads to hard falls and violent falls like we saw in Pittsburgh. The injury in Minnesota, that's a balance issue where he's trying to control his body and catch a ball deep, but he can't do it. We see the drop pass at the end of the season. That is a body control balance issue. He's so focused on keeping his body in the right spot that he loses focus on catching the ball. Can those things be improved with a brand new coach? Probably not, but you can put Treylon Burks in better situations to succeed. You can get him on more in-breaking routes, more short routes, throw more screens to him, get him involved in gadget plays where you hand the ball off to him so he can use that big body and that speed and that what should have been yards after catch ability that we saw in college. He can use that now in the NFL. So you want to talk about guys who can bounce back now that Brian Callahan is the head coach? At the top of my list is Treylon Burks. And again, I have been incredibly critical of Burks. And honestly, I have lost faith in Treylon Burks. But That was under Mike Vrabel, where you knew nothing was going to change. Now that you get Brian Callahan in here, you have the potential to use Treylon Burks in a more intelligent way, get him involved more consistently, and the Titans ran an incredibly complicated offensive system. I don't think that Treylon Burks is a guy who is maybe as deep into a playbook as other guys will be. So simplifying things for Burks and allowing him just to use his natural talents, that is going to give him the ability to have more success. So for me, talk about bounce back candidates, number one for me is Treylon Burks. And despite my criticisms in the past, again, I always say this, just because I think something is going to happen doesn't mean that it will. So just because I have an opinion on something doesn't mean that I'm going to be right all the time. And while I have ruled out Treylon Burks as someone to pay attention to going forward, that doesn't mean I'm going to be right. And it is possible that now with Brian Callahan in tow, that Treylon Burks could have a bounce back season. And if you had Treylon Burks as a number 2 wide receiver, no, it wouldn't fulfill the first round ideas that we had for him, but it would still be a great benefit to the Tennessee Titans. So Treylon Burks, I think that he will bounce back under Brian Callahan if it gets the opportunity. And I think it could be big for the Tennessee Titans going forward, even if, again, he doesn't live up to that first round pedigree and the shadow of A.J. Brown. But outside of Treylon Burks, Dillon Radunz is a guy who I think could really take a step forward here. So we saw Dillon Radunz play his best football at the end of the season, came back from the ACL tear, and was a better player than we've ever seen before. I think some of that is maturation. I think that Dillon Radunz is a little bit of an immature personality, and as he grows older and turns more into the man that he's going to be, I think that's obviously going to help him. But he even said himself, dealing with the ACL allowed him to really focus on strength, and he looked strong out there. And if we're honest, you want to replace him as right tackle, but he was actually pretty solid at right tackle at the end of the season. You go back and look at his performance. So I think that you get a guy like Dillon Radunz, you shift him inside to guard and let him focus on one spot instead of the Titans moving him all around the offensive line all the time and Mike Vrabel not understanding the value of continuity on the offensive line. Let Dillon Radunz focus on being a guard, your right guard, using that strength, using that anchor, using that athleticism that he had coming out of college. I think that having him with Brian Callahan and maybe offensive line coaching from Mike Munchak, Tom Cable, Bill Callahan, whoever it ends up being, I think we could see Dillon Radunz. Actually, again, the Titans have missed on so many early picks in recent years. If Brian Callahan could come in and get Dillon Radunz and Treylon Burks to play better football, that would be just as big as getting more draft picks, because now guys who are drafted in certain spots are living closer to the value that you were hoping they would bring, and that would help kind of solve that issue. So Treylon Burks and Dillon Radunz are at the top, but quickly, of course, Kyle Phillips. I think Kyle Phillips has not been valued. He was a healthy scratch at times during the year. His skill set was simply not valued by the Mike Vrabel organization, by the Mike Vrabel administration at the end of the day. So having someone who understands the value of someone who can constantly separate, constantly get open, work out of the slot, like having a coach that respects and values that, I think that could be absolutely huge. So for me, at the top of the list, it's Treylon Burks and Dillon Radunz. But of course, as an honorable mention here, you got to throw Kyle Phillips in there, who should get much more opportunity and be valued on all 3 downs by Brian Callahan. But let me know down below who your top bounce back candidates are under Brian Callahan. There are some guys, though, who I think could be traded by the Tennessee Titans now that Brian Callahan is coach. We're going to talk about that. Plus, I got a Rollins rant on the offensive line versus wide receiver debate that continues to rage on. We're going to get into all of that in just a moment. Before we do, though, I do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel. Again, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. All right, for me, I love the Chiefs in this game. I absolutely love them. They're getting points right now. I think that they're going to end up being favorites by the time that all the bets are collected. I love Isaiah Pacheco, his player props, rushing yards, a touchdown score. Love Pacheco in this game. You can get really good odds on Isaiah Pacheco as Super Bowl MVP right now. I got it at plus 10,000 last week. You're at about plus 3,400 right now. But either way, FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. It's Super Bowl 58, but there's also player props, money line, spread. New customers who join today can get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We just talked about players who could bounce back under Brian Callahan, but now I want to shift to players who could be traded away from the Tennessee Titans because of Brian Callahan's hire. Before I get into that, thank you guys again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday. Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. I got coaching staff breakdowns when we get coordinator hires. We're going to go into free agency preview, draft preview, cap management, roster decisions. So much to talk about going through this offseason. One of the most pivotal off seasons in franchise history. You want to stick with me here on the Locked On Titans podcast. But when you look at players who could be traded by the Tennessee Titans, who maybe don't necessarily fit with what Brian Callahan is going to want to do, number one who sticks out to me is Nicholas Petit-Frere. Again, you have three guys, in my opinion: Dillon Radunz, Nicholas Petit-Frere, and Jaylon Duncan. They're all kind of in a similar spot. They're maybe backup linemen, maybe your fifth starter at best. Not Duncan. Duncan, of course, I think is still a project player. But with the investment, the money, the cost of Jaylon Duncan, I think he's safe. He's going to be your 8th, 9th offensive lineman when we get to the roster. I think that's fine. So really for me, it comes down to Dillon Radunz or Nicholas Petit-Frere. And you could make the argument that because Nicholas Petit-Frere was drafted more recently, that you would stick with him for the money. Also, Radunz, second-year player. But Nicholas Petit-Frere would have better trade value because of those reasons as well. Dillon Radunz is going into the final season of his contract. If somebody's going to take a risk on one of these guys and take a trade, give you a day 3 pick. And again, I'm talking about day 3 picks here. Talking about 5th, 6th, 7th round picks just to stock the cupboards, give the Titans more ammo to move around. I don't think you need all of these guys on the roster because you're going to bring in free agents. You're going to probably draft some guys on the offensive line who are going to take those spots. So you don't need all of these swing tackles, depth guys. To me, who I would want in my starting lineup, I think Dillon Radunz has the ability to play guard better than Nicholas Petit-Frere does. I think Petit-Frere is more suited to be outside at tackle, and the Titans need to go out and get better tackle play than Nicholas Petit-Frere is going to give them. And if you're talking about your backup swing tackle, I think Jaylon Duncan can fill that role, okay? Or at least be your development young guy there. So to me, talk about who could give you the most value in a trade, I think Nicholas Petit-Frere is the right answer. And you talk about who I would be more comfortable with playing that right guard position as a starter, and for me, it's Dillon Radunz. So it makes it easy to call Nicholas Petit-Frere the guy who I think could be a trade option for the Titans. Number one, Brian Callahan in his press conference even said they're looking for guys with good anchor, pass protectors. Well, to me, Nicholas Petit-Frere was always better in the run game, all right? And Nicholas Petit-Frere does not have a good anchor. He's a little bit light in the back pocket, all right? Where Dillon Radunz has really improved his strength, I think that Nicholas Petit-Frere got the gambling suspension, came back, had a major injury as well. I just think that if you're looking at guys who could easily be traded and give you a day 3 pick, to give you more ammo, not only just to stick and pick, but to move around in the draft, which is what the Titans should be looking to do here. I think Nicholas Petit-Frere getting jettisoned to another team who may be looking for an offense. Look, this offensive tackle class is good. Make no mistake about it. But there's not a lot of depth in day 3 because of NIL. NIL is causing less underclassmen to declare for the draft. It's making the last 2 days of the draft maybe not as good as they've been in the past. I think it would make sense for a team who wanted to get a day 3 offensive tackle but doesn't really like the options to take that swing on Nicholas Petit-Frere with 2 years left in his contract and see what they can get there. So I think whether you're talking about value, whether you're talking about fit with Brian Callahan, whether you're talking about confidence and who could actually step in and be the 5th starter, the 5th best offensive lineman on the team, I think Dylan Radins is the obvious keep, and Nicholas Petit-Frere is a guy who you could get a better trade for. So Nicholas Petit-Frere is number 1 on my list. Number 2, it's Malik Willis. All right, look, do I think that Malik Willis has a trade market? No, I don't. I really don't. Some of you guys think he does. I think that's insane. I don't think any team is out there saying, hey, we're going to give you anything for Malik Willis. But conditional draft picks do exist, and we've seen the Titans make these kinds of trades before. Hey, we're going to trade a conditional 7th rounder in 2026 for Malik Willis. If he doesn't make the roster, then the pick doesn't convey and the Titans don't get it. All right? But either way, I don't think Malik Willis is going to be on this team this year because now that Brian Callahan is in, 2 reasons. Number 1, if Will Levis is your starting quarterback as a second-year player, your backup quarterback needs to be an experienced veteran. People talking about drafting a quarterback, sticking with Malik as the backup, I think you're insane. You don't want a second-year quarterback and then have your backup be a developing quarterback who's young as a rookie or a 3rd-year player, Malik, who's really kind of a rookie anyways. That doesn't make any sense for the Titans, who need to be focused on winning games. If you're going to have Will Levis as your starting quarterback, which they are, hands down, no questions, then you need to go get an experienced veteran backup. Not only someone who can come in and maybe win you a game if Levis is knocked out for a couple quarters, maybe win 1 game if Levis is out for a couple of weeks. Yeah, if he's out for the whole season, whatever. But even more reason to have a strong veteran backup quarterback. And now with Will Levis being your starting quarterback on a rookie contract, now you have the money to go out and do that where you didn't when Ryan Tannehill was making $100 million. It is imperative that you have a veteran backup quarterback for those reasons. And to double down on that, you need someone who can teach the offense to Will Levis, be a guy who's actually a player to help the other players understand what Brian Callahan wants. A veteran backup quarterback is key, and the Titans have their young developing quarterback in Will Levis. There is no more room for Malik Willis. And if you can get a team who wants to maybe take a shot on him, the Steelers, the Seahawks, there are teams the Rams, there are teams out there who may say, hey, we'll give you a conditional 7th rounder in 2026. If Malik Willis doesn't make the roster and we cut him, you don't get the pick. If he does make the roster, then you get the pick. The Titans are going to cut him anyways. So that would be a great, and let's just call it what it is. Look at Brian Callahan's history at quarterback. Peyton Manning, Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr, Joe Burrow. None of those guys are super athletes like Malik Willis. So he wouldn't even fit into what Brian Callahan wants to do on offense. Okay? So to me, it's clear cut that Nicholas Petit-Frere and Malik Willis are the top 2 targets as guys who should be traded away. I'm going to throw in a bonus one here real quick. I don't feel confident about it, so don't even get in the comments and hold me to it, all right? But depending on who's brought in as defensive coordinator, Harold Landry. If the Titans do, for some reason, bring in a coordinator that wants less of a versatile guy, Harold Landry is a smaller edge rusher. He is a speed guy with bend and to get around the edge, good length, but he's all about dipping and bending, and he's a smaller guy, and he's got versatility. He can drop back into coverage. He'll play against the run. If for some reason the Titans bring in a defensive coordinator that wants a more big-bodied, 6'5", 6'6", stronger defensive end that maybe doesn't have the versatility, but does those things better than Harold Landry does as a big, strong end player, then maybe Harold Landry would make some sense, although he is expensive, and I think that would hurt the value. I don't think that's going to happen, but again, depending on who the defensive coordinator is, maybe that's something that would make sense, although I would not be in favor of that. I love Harold Landry. You got to keep him. He's going to blow up next year once he's fully healthy from the ACL, and we saw what he could do after the bye. So with that being said, I got to end today's episode with a little Roland's rant for you guys. The offensive line versus wide receiver debate has popped back up, and I'm just absolutely sick of it. So we're going to get into that to finish the show here in just a moment. Before we do, though, Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks to exhaust kits to LED headlights, the things I don't even know about that go on your car. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available for U.S. customers. Titans fans, we are going to cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We've talked about Treylon Burks being a bounce-back candidate. Let me know your bounce-back candidates down below. We talked about who could be traded away from the Titans now that Brian Callahan is the head coach. Let me know your top trade options as well. But now I want to do a little Roland's rant on this offensive line versus wide receiver debate that continues to rage. Before we get into it, though, do want to thank you guys again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Also want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's called Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts from Locked On, plus all our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Okay. You've seen the meme. I'm sure you've seen the meme. If you haven't, I will explain. There's a quarterback. Okay. There's one offensive lineman blocking one defender with a wide receiver unguarded down the field. One is usually in red, one's usually in blue. And the idea is, hey, we're trying to showcase the difference between taking a wide receiver and an offensive lineman. On the blue one, you'll have top-tier offensive linemen. Anybody at wide receiver, and the quarterback is completing a pass. The other one is anybody at offensive tackle and a top-tier wide receiver, and the quarterback's getting sacked. It goes back to the Cincinnati Bengals debate. Should they have taken Jamar Chase? Should they have taken Penei Sewell? All right. So, the Bengals succeeded. The Bengals picked right. The Bengals should have picked Jamar Chase. They went to an AFC Championship game. They went to a Super Bowl. The Bengals, with Jamar Chase, accomplished the same as the Titans have accomplished for 25 years. 2 years with Jamar Chase. The Bengals accomplished the same as the Titans did for 25. Titans fans have no right whatsoever to say that the Bengals failed or made the wrong choice. 2 years equal to 25. The Bengals absolutely made the right choice by taking Jamar Chase. It's not debatable, okay? And I live in Bengals country. I am from Ohio. I live here. I'm not from Cincinnati, but I'm an hour away, and all of my friends are Bengals fans. They would not change the pick at all. 11 out of 10 times, they would still take Jamar Chase, not Penei Sewell. Penei Sewell is one of the best offensive tackles in the entire NFL. But Jamar Chase is a top 5 wide receiver. They went to a Super Bowl. The Titans haven't been to one since 1999. How can you say that is a failure? And look, you can point out that Burrow has had injury issues. That's great. Yes, they have. but what they have accomplished and what they have done already makes it a success. And also, let me talk to this point, okay? Because in that meme, in that graph, in that graphic, whatever you want to call it, where Penei Sewell is blocking and anybody's playing wide receiver, did anyone watch the game? You know what the Lions could have used? A wide receiver who didn't drop passes. So we can't pretend like you can have just anybody at wide receiver, and just because you have a good offensive line, that's going to get the job done. That is not how it works either. And if we're being honest, the offensive line is a collection of people. One wide receiver can impact a team more than one offensive lineman. If you have one top-tier offensive lineman and the other four are crap, your offensive line is still going to be bad. So, let me just say this. We have proven with the Cincinnati Bengals that graph is stupid. That meme is stupid. They went to a Super Bowl by picking Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell. And then on the flip side, the other version of it with Penei Sewell blocking and anyone at wide receiver has been proven wrong too. The Lions lost. You could blame Dan Campbell's fourth down decisions, not kicking a field goal. But what really lost the game for the Lions was dropping passes and killing drives. They didn't score until the very last minute in the second half. You can't just have anybody at wide receiver. That doesn't work either, because the real answer is you need a good offensive line and good wide receivers. If you're not Tom Brady, if you're not Patrick Mahomes, which I got a lot of faith in Will Levis, but what are the odds that he's Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes? You know what I mean? If you're not the greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen of all time and you're going to win a Super Bowl, then you need to be like San Francisco with a great offensive line and great wide receivers. So I say all that to come back to the realistic scenario the Titans are in. I want Joe Alt. I want the Titans to draft Joe Alt, offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. That is my number one pick. That is my number one option realistically. Of course, I want Marvin Harrison Jr., but he's not going to be available. So out of the realistic options for the Titans, I want Joe Alt. No doubt about it. But if the Titans and Brian Callahan have the choice between Malik Neighbors and Joe Alt, and they pick Malik Neighbors, I'm not going to lose my mind. I'm not going to be pissed. I'm going to be excited. You need great wide receivers just as much as you need great offensive linemen, and that stupid graphic has been proven wrong on both sides, because the Bengals went to a Super Bowl with anybody on the offensive line, and the Lions failed on offense with anybody at wide receiver. You need good both. I prefer Joe Alt, but I am not going to bellyache and boo-hoo if they decide to take Malik Neighbors either, because you need both. And there is no one way, there is no blanket statement that you can use in the NFL to create winning. It can be done multiple ways. And Brian Callahan has seen that done multiple ways. But with that being said, that's going to end today's show. All right, had to get that off my chest. I'm just so sick of seeing that meme, man. It's just so stupid. But I'll be back with you guys tomorrow. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.